Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 1993 event story, Return of Superman, part of the Death and Return of Superman story from DC Comics. If you didn't watch my previous video on the reign of the Supermen, then I highly recommend you go watch that now because it sets up everything I'm going to be talking about in this video. And that's because, as I sort of alluded to last time, when these issues were coming out, they were still considered part of the reign of the Superman arc. It wasn't until they were collected together that they were called the Return of Superman. To put that another way, every issue of the main 4 Superman series running in 1993 were considered part of the reign of the Superman arc, and it was those issues that were included in the very first Return of Superman collection that DC made. Recently, DC has split those issues into 2 volumes, adding back in the annuals for the titles that weren't really part of the story, but instead side stories that were part of the Bloodlines event that attempted to introduce brand new superhero characters to appeal to a 90s audience. It didn't really work. Since those stories aren't really related to the main theme here, I'm not going to really be covering them. Instead, I'll be focusing on the main topic, which is the 4 different Supermen who appeared in our previous story. The sunglasses-wearing last son of Krypton, the cyborg Superman called the Man of Tomorrow, the possible clone of Superman called Superboy, and the armor-wearing Man of Steel. All 4 of these guys appeared in our previous story after DC had given it some time so that they could convince the world that Superman, who had apparently been killed fighting the monster Doomsday, was really and truly dead. But Jonathan Kent, Superman's dad, either in a dream or in the afterlife, had saved Superman's soul, returning it to the world, leaving open the possibility that one of these 4 new Supermen might be the actual Superman himself. But which one could it be? Well, let's find out and take this away. The comic opens exactly where the previous one left off, with Supergirl and Superboy buried in the ruins of the Hobbs Neck Bridge in Metropolis. They're alright, of course, but this is still a significant disaster considering that Vincent Edge, owner of Galaxy Broadcasting Systems, and not Morgan Edge as I called him last time because that's Vinny's son, whoops. Vincent Edge actually set this disaster up by paying minor supervillain Stinger to attack Superboy on live TV. I guess seeing the super rich and powerful do something bad was supposed to be a lot more shocking in 1993. It's also significant because people almost certainly die, even though the comic does make a point of Super's girl and boy doing their part to rescue survivors in even the most unlikely situations. I mean, it's good that these kids are still alive in their somehow still intact car underwater, but to be honest, the impact from the fall probably should have been enough to kill them. But can't really blame the comic too much for that. After all, it could be that blasted Comics Code Authority dictating how this went. What is truly weird, though, is how flirty the 2 heroes get at the end of this whole mess. I mean, at this point, Superboy had been shown to be little more than a horn dog, so it's not unusual for him. But Supergirl is normally more reserved and is dating Lex Luthor currently, as gross as that is, so her reaction is a bit more out of place. But it's especially weird because they're still at the ruined bridge surrounded by death and destruction. They seem to be literally 5 feet away from a corpse at the time. Never thought of that as a romantic situation before. Corpses. How necromantic. The last reason this incident is significant is because there's another Superman watching these events with great disappointment. It's unclear initially which Superman this is. That's because he just emerged from out of the Kryptonian regeneration matrix thingy that we saw Sunglasses Superman using last time to get his powers. So the obvious conclusion is that this is the Sunglasses Superman, the so-called last son of Krypton. Though if it is, it's weird that he seems to be going through a repeat of his first appearance here, including seeming to have lost his memory and needing to be informed about the 4 Supermen running around. Though he says he doesn't need info on the sunglasses soups, and certainly the art team does a fantastic job making this visually appear to be the same guy, so obviously it's the same guy. right? And this is also an issue of Sunglass's title, because if you recall from my previous video, he was the star in Action Comics during this period. But the best part of this segment is this shot here where our mystery man says, "The name of Superman will not be turned into a franchise." Hilarious. Do you want to tell him, or should I? If this is the Sunglasses Soups, then this anger might explain why he shows up to Steel in Metropolis, and the two just immediately get into a fist fight. They almost calm down for a moment when Lois talks some sense into them, but a process server tries to serve them documents to get them to stop using the Superman name because Superboy, via his agent Rex Leach, has trademarked the Superman name. Guess he doesn't want it to be a franchise either. But Sunglasses burns the papers, and word that this puts people's lives into danger still pulls Sunglasses up into space to reignite their fight. They ended up landing in Coast City, where Steel goes all out on trying to stop his counterfeit Superman. Sunglasses' internal monologue says that Steel doesn't hold a candle to him, but the second Steel breaks his super sweet shades, the last son of Krypton goes running away crying. I mean, he says he's going to help out here in Coast City and going to allow Steel to be the protector of Metropolis, and I'm sure we all believe him. When Steel returns home, he's attacked by the White Rabbit. Once Luthor realized he couldn't get Steel to work for him, he instead partnered with Dr. Angora to attack the Man of Steel, hoping they might kill each other, while the Rabbit similarly wants both of her opponents eliminated. Her plan's a bit more complicated, but I'm not going to bother explaining it right now. Because getting back to the confrontation with the Man of Steel, who's arriving on a plane oh so generously offered to him by Lex Luthor, not suspiciously at all, we'll see Steel cuts through all of her forces. Even the weird little guy she always has with her, who's totally obsessed with her and turns into a giant fat monster thing. What? This is kind of the same fat-shamey joke as when the Blob sat on Wolverine, and about as effective. I don't know what's up with this character. With her troops taken out, Steel takes his ex-beau to the factory where she makes the Toastmasters, and she tries to use the machines to attack him. But in response, he ends up tearing the entire factory down. This seems to trap Angora inside, and she's left for dead, and that's the end of that story arc because we didn't have time for it after all. Because we have to move on to that alien ship that was teased at the very end of the previous collection, as it is now showing up in Coast City to do the most fiendishly evil thing in all history. It launches 1,000,000 bocce balls at the city. Confused as to why anyone would be that into bocce ball, or even know what that was, the White House contacts Cyborg Superman on the super secret communicator he gave to Clinton in the previous story, in order to get him to go investigate. And conveniently, as I just mentioned, the Sunglasses Superman is also in Coast City, so Cyborg is able to throw some shade on him, suggesting he's in league with the bocce ball aliens. So Cyborg flies to Coast City himself in order to get some answers, but instead of asking any questions, he just starts attacking his fellow Superman relentlessly, while those green orbs are revealed to actually be explosives that the aliens detonate to... holy shit. They just blew up all of Coast City. Like, all of it. Yep. Just in case you missed all of my Green Lantern coverage earlier in the year, first of all, how dare you? Second of all, yes, they really do destroy all of Coast City here. Something like 7 million people. Minus Carol Ferris and Hal Jordan's best bud Thomas Kelmaku, but including members of Hal's family and other important people probably as well. The last son of Krypton Superman gets beaten so bad by the Cyborg Superman that he turns back into his energy form and floats away. Meanwhile, down below the ashen remains of Coast City, a machine builds its way upwards until an entire new mechanical city stands in the place of the old city. It seems the alien behind this attack was the major supervillain Mongol. But even more than that, Mongol himself is subservient to the Cyborg Superman, the true mastermind of evil. Dun dun dun! I make fun, but this probably was a pretty big deal. People probably honestly believed Cyborg was Superman. Up to this point, he had seemed the most heroic. Shades had the whole brutality, fascism, and energy blast thing working against him. Superboy was by his own admission a clone, and I don't think anyone really bought still with Superman for a second, and he alone never really claimed to be either. But our potential real Superman practically kills our second best contender, blows up an entire major DC city, and partners with Mongol of all people. These were some serious revelations, all happening in a single issue. As for Mongol, he had only just fairly recently met Superman out in space on his planet called Warworld. A planet Mongol ruled with an iron fist as he made people fight in his gladiator arena, including even Superman himself. But Superman's mere presence ended up inspiring revolution on Warworld, and Mongol lost his throne and was forced to flee the planet. In exile, he would meet Cyborg Superman, and seeing his chance for revenge, would join with the Cyborg so the two could come to Earth and turn Earth into a new Warworld. Cyborg continues his evil plan by inviting Superboy to join him. Since the new Machine City is covered by layers of dust and debris, nobody can see what's actually happening there. So Superman claims he's fighting the Sunglasses Superman inside the gas cloud, telling the White House that it's Sunglasses who has joined with the aliens. So Superboy agrees to join in the hunt and shows up to Coast City, and Cyborg makes his first major slip-up, telling Superboy that he wishes he had the same confidence in his powers when he was Superboy's age. To Lois, this is a definitive revelation, since Superman didn't have his powers as a teenager. At least, not in the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths continuity, as that event erased the original Superboy comics. It still doesn't really seem that damning to me, though. It's just an expression, Lois. Maybe chill? You know he supposedly doesn't have much of his memory anyway. What's more suspicious to Steel is that the Sunglasses Superman could be giving both Cyborg Superman and Superboy so much trouble, when Steel, with no powers, was able to fight the last son of Krypton to a standstill. I mean, that's a bit of a self-serving memory of the conflict still, but your point still kinda stands, I guess. Except Superboy and Cyborg don't seem to be having that much trouble, as they're soon telling the Justice League that Sunglasses and the alien ship have fled Earth, and they ask the JLA to go after them, which they agree to without even trying to independently verify the info. That's why you always check your sources, kids. But in reality, what happened inside the cloud was Cyborg killed the military escort they had and then attacked Superboy. Since Superboy is more important of a character, though, he doesn't kill him. Instead, he captures him in the hopes of turning him to the dark side. But Superboy manages to use a new superpower he wasn't aware he had that lets him control machines in order to free himself and escape. He flies back to Metropolis in order to warn everyone about the truth, but ends up getting in a fight with Steel in a suit of Kryptonian battle armor. The battle armor had been in an earlier Superman story, but we saw it activate inside the Fortress of Solitude shortly after Sunglasses Superman escaped from his fight with the Cyborg. And we've occasionally been getting brief cutaways of it marching across the bottom of the ocean towards Metropolis. Now, here in this fight, it suddenly opens up, spitting out another Superman. And that means that this is Sunglasses Superman, right? Well, no. If you had been reading the comics, you would have already seen that this was not the Sunglasses Superman, as he had shown up to the fortress after the battle armor left. So what exactly does that mean? It means that all along, it was secret answer E, none of the above. Yeah, this is the real Superman, in his real body with his real soul. The comic will take some time to explain this bizarre mystery, but I'll go ahead and explain what's been going on. As we've already understood, John Henry Irons is his own man who was simply inspired by Superman, and Superboy was in fact just a clone. You won't learn it in this story or for a long time after this, but he's actually a clone hybrid of both Superman and Lex Luthor, which makes a comment Lex made to him in the previous story of them having a lot in common actually pretty hilarious. Sunglasses Superman is, turns out, the Kryptonian being known as the Eradicator, The Eradicator was a weapons system made on Krypton eons ago, but it gained sentience and devoted its life to preserving Krypton. This led to it eventually coming to Earth, where he came into conflict with Superman. The Eradicator had supposedly been destroyed in their fight, but the Fortress robots preserved his essence, essentially, and that was the energy that first appeared in the Fortress in the previous story. He converted materials in Superman's crypt into a usable body for him, and then brought Superman's actual body back to the Fortress, where he put it into the Kryptonian regeneration matrix to help it revive. And this happened, as we'll eventually learn, right as Jonathan Kent was returning Superman's soul to his body. So Superman was revived by forces of both science and magic, basically, making his return sort of a one-time thing since it required so many moving parts to align. Just in case you were worried they were going to try to kill him every other year or so. So then, who is Cyborg Superman? He's someone named Hank Henshaw. Henshaw's origin is a direct parody of the Fantastic Four's origin, complete with 4 astronauts going into space, being bombarded with radiation, and returning to Earth with fantastic powers. Only their cosmic radiation proved to be fatal, but Henshaw alone would survive by transferring his mind into a computer and rebuilding himself into a robot body. But with his new robotic body, he disrupted communication networks on Earth, so Superman chased him from the planet. But not before Henshaw used Superman's own rocket, the one that brought Superman to Earth as a baby, to grow himself yet another new robotic body. So that's why, as Cyborg Superman, his robotic body was made from Kryptonian machinery, while his human body was Superman DNA he was able to replicate because the rocket contained that DNA. After leaving Earth, Henshaw of course met with the recently defeated Mongol, and the two teamed up and returned to Earth, both angry at Superman and planning to get their revenge. There really needs to be a Road to Death of Superman collection that has some of these Henshaw and Eradicator comics in them, but maybe that's just me. So anyway, the returned real Superman gets together with Steel and Superboy to go fight Cyborg Superman in the remains of Coast City. But it seems Supes doesn't have his powers fully back yet because he's hurt by Steel squeezing his arm too hard and needs to borrow jet boots in order to fly. Man, I want jet boots. They start their assault on the new so-called Engine City anyway, giving us this panel that gets my vote for most 90s comic book moment in the entire collection. Superman with his long hair, carrying guns, wearing bullet belts, and with Superboy saying "slammin'" in the background. It certainly is, Superboy. It certainly is? They immediately discover that Mongol and Cyborg have a rocket prepared to send more explosive bocce balls at Metropolis, and he fires a missile before our heroes can find a way to stop it. But Superboy rides the missile Dr. Strangelove style until he finally manages to find a way to use his mechanical telekinesis power again to make the missile explode, seemingly sacrificing himself in the process. It'll quickly turn out that he's fine though, but he won't immediately return to help in Engine City due to his crossover in the Bloodlines event. And I know I said I'm not going to talk about those issues, and I'm not. Other than right here, I did want to say that this story sees Superboy partnering up with Maggie Sawyer, who keeps not being interested in Superboy in the way he expects her to. And it's at this point that I realized that Superboy might not yet know about the existence of LGBT people, and I would kinda love to be in the room when someone has to explain that to him. Anyway, back in Engine City, it's revealed to us that Supergirl secretly tagged along for the ride, sneaking in invisibly alongside Superman to help protect him and as the secret ace up their sleeve that Cyborg wouldn't have been able to see coming. Not that it matters a whole lot though, as the group quickly gets separated, with Steel heading to the Engine City's, engine room, where he tries to find a way to shut down the city, but ends up fighting the Cyborg Superman, and the real Superman and Supergirl fight Mongol elsewhere in the city. Without his powers now, Superman is no match for Mongol, and even Supergirl can't go toe-to-toe with that yellow bastard. Luckily for them, Hal Jordan shows up, understandably pissed at Mongol for what he did to Hal's hometown. GL still isn't really a good match for the powerful space monster, and Mongol keeps the upper hand for the battle, even breaking Lantern's arm during the fight. But Hal's willpower is just too great, and he makes himself a battlesuit and uses Steel's dropped hammer to deliver a knockout blow to the evil alien. Meanwhile, Steel literally throws himself into the gears of the machine to deliver real damage to the engine for the first time. And the Eradicator shows up to actually help Superman since, again, his main goal is the preservation of Kryptonian life, which now means preserving Superman's life. So the two face off against Cyborg at the power core for the engine, which turns out to be made out of radioactive kryptonite. The two Supermen seem to nearly be enough to defeat Henshaw, but before giving up, he tries to blast the real Superman with deadly kryptonite exhaust. Eradicator jumps in front of the blast though, and somehow that sends his essence and energy into Superman, because comic book reasons, powering him up back to full power once again, allowing him to quickly finish off the Cyborg. With some help from Supergirl, Clark gets his Superman costume back, and that is pretty much that. The comic ends with Superman returning to Metropolis to get back together with Lois and go about stopping crime and helping out around the city just like he used to. But when he runs across Bibbo and Bibbo's new dog, the very good boy Crypto, that's Crypto with a K, like Krypton, not like Bitcoin, they discover a couple people still buried under rubble created during the fight with Doomsday, who somehow managed to survive. This gets Jimmy to make the offhanded remark that maybe the same thing happened to Clark Kent. And this gives them a solution for how to bring Clark Kent back. So they have the idea to quote-unquote rescue Clark from where he was buried in a fallout shelter under some other rubble created during the Doomsday fight. And since it's Superman that's rescuing Clark Kent, it helps keep anyone from speculating about how weird it was that they both magically returned from the dead at the same time. And the Clark Kent in this situation, in case you're confused, is in fact Supergirl shapeshifted into the appearance of Clark Kent. There's a few other things to cover before we close this out. First, we see that Star Labs is attempting to revive the Eradicator for some reason. There's also a guy named Occult who shows up to Superman and Lois to explain how it was that Superman was able to come back to life, but I already explained all that. Superman also gets to meet with the new Nightfall Batman briefly, which isn't important, but kind of fun. He also gets together with the JLA and an angry Hal Jordan to tear down the remains of Engine City, which ends with Superman building a giant monument with an eternal flame as memorial for the millions of lives lost. Lastly, we see Clark Kent needing a new place to live since his apartment was sold to a certain Superboy, moving in with Jimmy Olsen. Not sure why he can't move in with his bride-to-be, but the 90s, I guess? And with that, we can finally get to the breakdown. What is there left to say? If you've stuck with me this far, you know that pretty much everything about the entire Death and Return arc is pretty epic. I love it from beginning to end. While I guess I couldn't pick any single issues out from this part of the comic as particularly exceptional, and while certain storylines seem to be rushed to conclusion because we ain't got time for that, this storyline overall is absolutely fantastic. It's crushing to have DC kill off literally an entire city in their universe, and the effects the death of Coast City will have on DC history literally up straight through to the New 52 reboot can hardly be understated, as you've probably seen if you've watched any of my Green Lantern videos. It was a big effing deal. And this story really made such great use of the 4 Supermen. Every single one of them got their moment to shine in this comic, whether for good or for bad, if not more than once. Superboy, for the first time, really makes himself into a hero, and we begin to really see the difference in his powers that will shape the course of his own personal mythology to come. Steel's storyline largely does come to an end here, but he too really gets to prove just how worthy of a successor he was to the Man of Steel title. Even the Eradicator makes his mark, being the unexpected hero the story needed to see things through to the end. In Cyborg Superman, despite being killed off very suddenly when they were ready for the story to end, permanently solidifies himself as one unforgettable supervillain for the rest of Superman history. Those of you who watched those videos can maybe see why I was so excited for him to reappear in the New 52 and Rebirth Supergirl titles, even if they drastically changed the character for those stories. So all in all, what I'm saying is that, of course, I give this series a recommendation level of very high. This is exactly the great Superman story we wanted to end this already great arc, and an overall fantastic conclusion to an already must-read comic book story. The collected edition gets 1 shiny silver Superman symbol. It's epically cool in a 90s way. It's slammin'. Thanks, Superboy. While there are, in a sense, practically no bonus features, just a couple alternate covers and a single page of some behind-the-scenes sketchwork on the new black suit look for Superman, it's still an absolutely jammed-packed collection featuring 15 regular issues, including a Green Lantern issue that they did not have to include, even if it's really good that they did, and also 2 annuals in addition. That's a ton of comic. You might even say it's super? Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you're all having safe and happy holidays. That does it for the Death and Return of Superman for now, and I'll probably move on to some X-Men comics from here. Also probably some more Marvel Zombies coming in along the way. If you enjoyed this video, then please help me hit that 1K on my subscribers list by clicking the subscribe. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, I've already hit it. It's getting so very close. Also be sure to hit the like and leave a comment and hang around for next time, and I hope to see you next year, right here in the Comic Cave.